Hey, good morning. This is Jeff Warrock here at the National Weather Service in Wakefield. Going to walk through the briefing here pretty quickly for this Wednesday, kind of covering the threat for severe weather today, even a little bit of a threat of snow as we get into Thursday afternoon. Won't mount to a whole lot, but we may see some. And also kind of touch on the marine conditions there with that gale watch in effect for the coastal waters. So really just kind of jumping right into it, jumping ahead. We'll kind of walk through the weather pattern here and see what's going on here in the big picture. So, right now today we kind of have this southwesterly flow, nice warm day, almost a summer-like day with record high temperatures expected. And that cold front's kind of making its way across parts of the Midwest and eventually is going to approach and move through here later on tomorrow morning. As we get into this afternoon, kind of maybe see a few little isolated showers and storms developing across the northern parts of the area in northern Virginia as that front starts to make its way through the Ohio River Valley. And then by this evening, that front will be starting to push into parts of eastern Kentucky and almost to West Virginia. And we'll kind of have a break maybe. Any kind of showers or storms that do develop will kind of have already pushed off to the east later on this evening. Get into tomorrow morning around 2 a.m. You see that front starting to make its way across the Shenandoah Valley. A pretty strong cold front there, bringing in some good wind and rain with it. And by the time we get into about 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, pushing right through and just east of the I-95 corridor, and even see this little wave of low pressure. See this little wave of low pressure forming along the front. And so that's going to help to kind of give us maybe a good little shot there of some precipitation. So everybody should get in on some good rainfall, maybe even a little bit of mix with snow. We'll talk about that here in a second. As this thing pushes east. And by the time you get into Friday evening, by about 8 o'clock, everything's really offshore. The cold front's offshore, precipitation's moving offshore, and high pressure's building in. And that builds in for Friday as well. So Friday, just a cooler day, but it's going to be drier. And you see the next strong cold front starting to drop down through parts of the Midwest here Friday morning. And by the time we get into Saturday, kind of get that second little shot there, just kind of giving us some reinforcing cold air. So that's just going to not allow us to warm back up too much, after this first front comes through. Get into Sunday morning. See the next weather system, big system coming here across the middle part of the country. Warm front starting to push up to the north towards us. And then by Monday morning, this system is actually starting to roll through the mid-Atlantic, bringing us another chance of rain. And again, some cooler temperatures once again for the good part of next week. And by Tuesday, again, that front's offshore, and now we have some cold high pressure moving in. So kind of that's typical spring roller coaster ride with temperatures going up and down for the next several days. Focusing on today's severe weather risk, we do have a slight risk, mainly north and west of Richmond. You kind of see here Louisa over towards Bowling Green, captures parts of the Maryland Eastern Shore over here towards Cambridge and Dorchester County. And so it's kind of a small area here for us for the slight risk, and that extends up into northern Virginia and parts of northwest Virginia. The area here in the darker green, that's a marginal risk where maybe, okay, if a storm develops, it could be severe, but we're not expecting a whole lot. And the main thing here is that the confidence right now in the actual storm development is low, and we'll kind of talk about what's going on there. No risk of severe storms there on Thursday or on Friday, just some rain on Thursday. So here's our risk of severe weather for this afternoon, kind of looking at it in the bigger picture. And so the timing, probably more like this afternoon, I'd say, maybe 3 to let's say 6 o'clock here in parts of Virginia. If it's going to be on the Maryland Eastern Shore, it's going to be a little bit later, probably more like about, maybe it's 5 to about, let's say 8 o'clock or so, maybe out in that area. And the main thing here is, if we're going to have, the main threat is going to be damaging winds. We could see an isolated tornado, maybe a little bit of hail. The problem is the overall confidence in storm coverage is really low, and I'll kind of step through that and show you guys what's going on there. But not a lot of confidence that we're going to see many storms. But if a storm does develop, the atmosphere is set up such that the storms up in this area, they could be pretty strong and maybe even severe. And so that's the problem. It's like the atmosphere doesn't have a lot of fuel in it, so the coverage of storms is going to be very limited. But there's a lot of energy in the atmosphere and power, so if the storms do develop, if we do get one, it could be a decent storm and cause some severe weather. So the main threats here's the tornado threat, very, very low tornado threat there for our northwestern area. A little bit better threat as you get into the brown area here over northern and northwest Virginia. And in fact, you see this hatched area up there. So the hatched area means that, in that area, if we do get some storms develop, we could see some stronger variety tornadoes. And we classify that as EF2 or so. So, this hatched area, the atmosphere is primed that, hey, if we do get a storm and it starts to spin, it might be able to produce a tornado and maybe even one of a stronger variety. But the probability is low, and that's because the coverage is low. We're just not expecting that much coverage. For us, you do see in central Virginia getting down closer to Louisa and Bowling Green and Dorchester, you see the probability of damaging wind is a little bit higher, 15 to 29%. So that's our main threat really in our area is going to be, could we see some damaging wind, even if a storm develops from Farmville to Richmond to Salisbury and Ocean City. If you do get one, yeah, there's a low threat that you could see some damaging wind, and also a low threat there for some large hail. So let's see what this might look like. We'll show a simulated reflectivity here off the HRRR model, and we'll kind of step this through time. And what you're going to notice is there's just not much that develops over Virginia. This is by about 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock this afternoon. You may see some stuff popping up over the mountains. And then you're starting to see these individual cells developing. And the main thing here is, the model doesn't know exactly where the storms are going to be, but it knows it's going to be there. And so you see these storms developing over parts of western and northern Virginia, maybe even here just north of Fredericksburg. And so these are individual discrete cells. So if they do get going and they do pull in enough fuel, they could become severe. You kind of see they keep kind of popping up here. Here's an individual cell popping up just a little ways northwest of Louisa. It rolls this one up towards Fredericksburg. Could that be further south? It definitely could be. It's just showing you there could be a very, very isolated, almost like supercell type storm rolling across the area. But it's not a lot of coverage. Could just be very few of them where we have the slight risk. And it does continue to kind of roll on and eventually gets over here to the eastern shore. And that's why you see kind of rolling here through maybe Cambridge. Could that be a little bit further south? It definitely could be. And this time here is by about 7 o'clock this evening, kind of rolling through out there. So just not a lot of coverage. And eventually this stuff kind of does start to move off and get away from us. And then we see the next big slug of rain coming in really for Thursday morning. See these like scattered showers developing Thursday morning, maybe some gusty showers. And eventually that bigger area of rain comes through for the afternoon, maybe even mixed with some snow. And eventually even that moves offshore by about 8 o'clock tomorrow evening. So just maybe that isolated threat where we could get a few isolated storms popping up, mainly in north and west of Richmond today. So this is our chance of precipitation, and then a lot of this rainfall amount is going to actually fall tomorrow. So you see today our chances of precipitation are really pretty low. Bowling Green, only about maybe a 30% chance. Same thing with Cambridge, and that's later on today. And then for Louisa, maybe about a 30% chance this afternoon and early evening. And everybody else is really, 20% probability of precipitation or less. So we're just not expecting that much cover. Atmosphere could create some severe weather, just not enough fuel to really get it going. But if you look for tomorrow morning, yeah, everybody gets in on the rain. Between 6 and 9 o'clock, everybody's getting some good precipitation, and eventually that spreads in through the afternoon and really starts to taper off from west to east later on in the afternoon and in the evening. And by 8, 9 o'clock, everything's over. Everything should be offshore pretty good. Now, talking about how this stuff might change over to snow, what's up with that? Because I know some folks are talking about it. So this is 4 a.m. tomorrow morning. Don't see a whole lot going on. Rain here over the mountains. But as you push through the morning hours, and we'll go ahead and push into about 7, 8 o'clock, you really start to see the rainfall starting to increase along the I-95 corridor and even pushing out here towards the bay. So should start to see some rain moving in with that front tomorrow morning. And as you push into about, let's say, noon, kind of going through the day, eventually gets to Hampton Roads, rainfall increases. So it may pick up, be a little bit heavier as we get through the later morning. But then by noon, you start to see that cold air is catching up with the precipitation, and it's forcing it over to snow. And that probably will happen. And this is at noon. And as we push into about 1, 2 o'clock, yeah, you see that snowfall making its way into the I-95 corridor. And it could be a little bit of a burst of snow, be that rain-snow mix changing over to a burst of snow. Now, it's been warm. It's been in the 80s today. You're going to have the ground very wet with a lot of rain ahead of this, and then it's going to change to snow, and the temperatures are going to be above freezing. So is this going to stick? Probably not. May it stick to the mulch and the grass for a little while, and a little bit, it might. You might see a little bit of a light dusting on some of those surfaces, but this is not going to be an impactful snow. It's just too warm. Everything's really wet ahead of this. Snow doesn't stick to water very well. So, it's going to move on through, but we will see the snow. And it's going to push its way over to the eastern shore. And eventually, it's going to push its way down into Hampton Roads through the afternoon. So, it's still in the I-95 corridor at 4, but eventually you start to see this maybe light rain snow mix by about, I'd say 5, 6 o'clock, even getting into Hampton Roads and all of the eastern shore here. So that's just where that cold air is catching up with it. And then eventually all this pushes offshore by about 8 o'clock, and it's pretty much over. So don't be shocked. You see a little bit of snow. It just won't be impactful. And in fact, if you look at the probability of just seeing any type of accumulation, less than a tenth of an inch of snow on the mulch, you can see the probabilities are pretty low. 20% or less that you're going to see any type of snow accumulation. So yeah, it might fall, but is it going to accumulate? Probably not. As far as your rainfall totals, this is the big event here through Friday night, picking up most of the rainfall, but we do have that event coming in later weekend, early next week, that could bring us even a little bit more precipitation. So the image here on the left is what's coming through on Thursday for tomorrow, and then the one on the right here is really late weekend and then early next week. So we do have another shot of some rainfall coming. Now, one thing we want to just be aware of is the fact when this front comes through, it's a strong front. It's changing the rain over to snow, so it's a strong front. And so when that front pushes through, we're going to see some pretty strong gusty winds. You're going to have some gusty winds ahead of the front, but when that front comes through, would not be shocked to see some folks gusting up, maybe even up to 40 miles per hour, maybe even 45 near the coast as that front comes through. So we're just going to have to kind of keep an eye on that. This is a simulation of the wind gust. It does a pretty good job here. This is just, this evening, not much going on. Maybe a little bit of gustiness, here later on this afternoon. You see those southwest winds may gust up to 30 this afternoon. And as we push through tonight, the winds do let up a little bit, maybe some gusts to 20. But then when you see that front come through tomorrow morning, you really start to see that wind. Here it comes, coming down through northern Virginia here, gusts to 35 to 40. And they eventually push their way down the bay. Richmond's starting to gust to 30, seeing some gusts to maybe close up to 40 miles per hour here coming down the bay tomorrow morning at 8. And that wind just continues to push on down. And maybe even some gusts out here, maybe getting close to 40 to 45 here of parts of Hampton Roads, Eastern Shore, here along the bay. That's some pretty good wind coming down. Even in Richmond, some gust up 35 miles per hour tomorrow morning. Could even see one gust of 40 with that front. And so this is really tomorrow morning when that front comes through and that cold air surges in. But then you see tomorrow afternoon those winds actually decrease. So it's just a quick shot of some decent gusts there when that front comes through tomorrow morning. So just be aware of that when that thing comes through. You're probably going to know it when the front comes through. The winds are really going to pick up and be windy there for a little while. As far as temperatures, you can see how warm we are today. Record high temperatures, well into the 80s. But then tomorrow, quite a bit cooler. It's a little bit warmer in the southeast because the front just gets down there later. But you see Louisa's high tomorrow is only 55. And then everybody's cooler, obviously, for all day there on Friday behind that front. And that second front's going to push through later on the day on Friday as well. So just looking at our temperatures, I definitely see that cool off for Friday and a little bit into the weekend. Slight warm up there for Sunday, but then another front comes through early next week, kind of pushes our temperatures back down. In fact, looking at some of the temperatures there for Tuesday morning, a lot of low 30s in here. So that next front to come through later on this week is strong, later next week. And we got that strong front coming through with some cold temperatures there Friday morning. So typical springtime temperatures up and down, roller coaster with the fronts coming through, and then temperatures warm up in between the fronts. See that good chance of rain here for Thursday. So that's with that front coming through. Then we get a break in the rain. And the next shot of rain after Thursday really doesn't come until Sunday night and into early Monday morning. That's with the next big front that's coming through, bringing us some cooler temperatures again for next week. So that's our next rainmaker there later on into next week. Shifting gears into the marine side of the house, we do have a gale watch in effect from Cape Charles south where we might see the winds last out here a little bit longer, maybe even right at the Bay Bridge Tunnel. This is where the winds might go 34 knots or greater behind that front, maybe a little bit longer. And so we'll see how long that lasts. Just kind of jumping into it here. You can see everything in orange represents small craft advisory conditions, where the red represents potential gale conditions. So you see those potential gale conditions there really for Thursday, especially Thursday morning, early afternoon, where we could see a little bit of gales. But that's about it. We're not expecting any gale conditions outside of that. And so here's the peak winds that we're expecting. So you kind of see here overall maybe some gusts to 36 knots here at the Capes and south and east. So just barely getting us into some gales. I will say when that front initially pushes through, even locations in the bay might see that initial blast of wind up to about 40 knots or so, and it may only last about an hour. And so we're not, we don't have a forecast in there for that just 1 hour time frame of wind. So if that does happen, we will have to issue special marine warnings for the Chesapeake Bay. And if those come, those will come Thursday morning when that front comes down. Could be a quick spike up to about 40, 45 knots. And then all of a sudden the winds come right back down once the front pushes through and that surge is kind of weakening. So we'll have to watch out for that. The winds could be a little bit stronger. That initial gust front may be a little bit stronger than what we're showing here, but it gives you a general sense of those stronger winds coming through Thursday morning. And just kind of looking at the bigger picture, you see a little bit of gusty winds ahead of the front, maybe 20, 25 knots with the south wind ahead of the front there later tonight. And then when we get into tomorrow morning, those winds shift, sustained about 20, 25 knots and then gusting up to 30, maybe 35 knots. But again, that initial blast with the front could be a little bit stronger and a little bit over 40 knots. And we'll be issuing special marine warnings if that does happen. Wave height with respect to that, I mean, basically waves will build up with a southerly wind increasing by around maybe 5 feet or so off the coast, about maybe 3 feet in the bay. And then with that front coming through Thursday, that northwest wind will definitely kick the waves up to about 4 to 5 feet in the Chesapeake Bay. With that strong surge coming down, with that northwest to north wind coming down, going to kick these waves up to about 4 to 5 feet. And then the ocean here, especially at the mouth of the bay in south and east, is going to kick up to about 5 to 7 feet with that surge of air that behind that cold front. So right now, not too bad today overall, generally about 2 to 3 feet. The southwest winds may be building the ocean up a little bit, but the real bigger waves come in really with that front as it comes through tomorrow morning and into early tomorrow afternoon. With that, just a reminder, it is Severe Weather Awareness Week this week. We're talking about a different topic every day, and we'll appreciate y'all tuning in, and we'll talk to everybody later.